this is Guy Lawrence and welcome to another episode of the Health Sessions. We've got a fantastic guest in store for you today, and his name is Dr. Joe Dispenza, and he's certainly been a bit of a hero of mine over the years, so it was just awesome to have him on the show and be able to chance to spend some time with him. If you're not familiar with his work, he first sprang onto the scene in 2004, and he was one of the scientists featured in the award-winning film What the Bleep Do We Know? Now, if you haven't seen that, it's a great place to start and go and check it out. And then he's gone on and become a best-selling author. He's written 3 books: Evolve Your Brain, and then followed by Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, and of his latest book, which is called You Are the Placebo, hit the New York Times bestseller list within a week of its release back a couple of years ago. So already you can start to see what his work would be all about. As a teacher and lecturer, Dr. Joe has been invited to speak in more than 27 countries, going about educating thousands of people on how they can rewire their brains and recondition their bodies to make long-lasting changes. That stuff sounds good to me, I can tell you. And as a researcher, sorry, get my words out, Dr. Joe explores the science behind spontaneous remissions and how people heal themselves of chronic conditions and even terminal diseases. And he shares his own personal journey on this as well, which is just fascinating, and you don't want to miss it. He's more recently began partnering with other scientists to perform extensive research on the effects of meditation, which during his advanced workshops. And yes, I'll be attending his workshop here in Melbourne next month in June. So I think it's June the 19th. So if you're hearing this before then and want to come along, it'll be definitely awesome to see you there. We always get asked, where's the best place to start on your health journey if it all seems a little bit overwhelming. We generally tell people to start with our ebook. It can be downloaded. It's completely free. It's 26 pages long, outlining all the principles that we feel you should apply and bring into your everyday life over time. And that's on 180nutrition.com.au. Consume that information. Then we've got our nourishing natural superfood blends. What we suggest with them is to actually just replace a bad food choice. When you're convenient, you're stuck in a jam, so you want something to easily to rely on, because we promote the message about just eating real food and being able to cut out as much processed foods as possible. And our nourishing superfood blends are a fantastic tool to help you implement and do that. I mix mine in a smoothie most mornings with avocado and berries, and that'll keep me going all morning. And then the third place, of course, is explore our blog, all the articles, and of course these podcasts where you can listen to on your way to work, walking the dog, whatever it is. And and let us know, how do you listen to yours? Are you enjoying them? Give us some feedback, leave us a review on iTunes. Tell us what you think. We really appreciate it. We'd really love to hear from you. And I look forward to it. So let's go for the Dr. Joe Dispenza. You're going to thoroughly enjoy this.
Brilliant. Look forward to it.
Fantastic. Hi, this is Guy Lawrence. I'm joined with Stuart Cook, as always. Good morning, Stu.
Hello, mate. How are you?
And our fantastic guest today is Dr. Joe Dispenza, and I should say good evening. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm happy to be with you too.
Really appreciate it, Joe. This is a topic that I'm absolutely fascinated with and very excited about today. I've been currently reading your book, Evolve Your Brain, and actually been mesmerized by your story at the beginning, back from your triathlete days. It's unbelievable. So I thought that'd be a great place to start. And if you'd mind just sharing with our listeners a little bit about what you do and also that story as well, because it's fantastic.
Sure. Well, that's probably the toughest out of my 3 books to start with. So you're a brave guy. Well, I never planned on doing any of this. I never planned on, teaching or lecturing publicly or writing books. In 1986, I was in a triathlon in Palm Springs, California. I was on the biking portion of the race, and I was making a turn, and I was passing 2 bikers on the turn, and there was a police officer on the corner, and he was pointing at me, and he was telling me to make this turn. And as I, passed the 2 bikers to merge onto the next road, he had his back to the oncoming traffic. So when I made the turn, a 4-wheel drive vehicle, an SUV going very fast, ran, kind of basically catapulted me out of my bike and dragged me down the road a little bit. And I wound up breaking 6 vertebrae in my spine. And when you land that hard on your back or on your butt, the columns of the vertebrae are blocks, and when there's that kind of compressive force, they kind of compress. And so I had broken the 8th, ninth, 10th, 11th, and 12th thoracic vertebrae and the first lumbar vertebrae. And when you compress those vertebrae, the bone fragments have to go somewhere. And in my case, they went back onto my spinal cord. One of the vertebrae, the 8th thoracic vertebrae, was more than 60% collapsed, but the arch where the spinal cord passed through broke like a pretzel, and so I had cord compression. And so anyway, the typical surgery in something like that is called the Harrington rod surgery. And I had 4 opinions from 4 of the leading surgeons in Southern California, and they were adamant that I should have the surgery. And they basically cut off the back parts of your vertebrae, and in my case, it would be from the base of my neck to the base of my spine, and then screw in these stainless steel rods to kind of cantilever and pull the spinal column off the cord, and then take some bone fragments from your hip and paste it over the top and hope for the best. And for me personally, I just couldn't make that decision. And after about a week of back and forth deciding if I should have the surgery, I decided finally to not have the surgery. And I began this journey where I just thought that there was some connection between the mind and body, and that there's an intelligence that's giving us life that if we could connect with and give it a plan or a template, a design, and then surrender that creation to a greater mind and allow it to organize it in a way that's right for us, maybe it could begin to do the healing for me. And so I wanted to make contact with this intelligence, and I just said, I'm not going to let any thought slip by my awareness that I don't want to experience. And it sounds really easy when you say it intellectually, but I went through hell because I couldn't get my mind to do what I wanted to do. I kept focusing on what I didn't want to have happen instead of what I did want to have happen. And 6 weeks it took me to finally really settle down and start really noticing some changes. And all of a sudden I started to notice that my body started getting better. And the moment I noticed those changes, I knew that I had done something properly. And I just basically made a deal with myself that if I was ever able to walk again, I'd spend the rest of my life studying the mind-body connection and mind over matter. And I walked back into my life in 10 weeks and was back doing races at 12 and treating patients.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a huge decision. I mean, at the time, was you feeling pressure to have the surgery, or was it? It's.
Well, this is not any. If I saw those X-rays and I saw the scans, and it was a patient of mine, I would have told them to have the surgery. But this was me, and I wasn't so quick to make that decision. But after the 4th opinion from the 4th surgeon, I just realized that I did not want to spend the rest of my life on living on addictive medications or living in a wheelchair, and that I was going to roll the dice. I was going to take a chance. And one of the doctors thought I had post-traumatic stress disorder, or that I hit my head or something was wrong, because nobody decides against a surgery like with the type of injuries that I had. But I just thought, well, I'm going to take a chance. I think I was young enough and probably innocent enough in a lot of ways, and I'm a pragmatist. I believe in practical application, and so it wasn't just a philosophy. I just wanted to see if it could work.
Wow. And so with that recovery, was meditation a big part of that? Yeah.
If I'm going to make contact with that intelligence that's keeping our heart beating and digesting our food and organizing all of these functions, it's giving us life. Consciousness is awareness, and awareness is paying attention. And so if this consciousness is giving us life, then it's paying attention to our thoughts and our feelings and our behaviors. So I reasoned that just like, when someone's present with you or conscious with you, they're paying attention, that if I was going to really make contact with this intelligence, I'd have to close my eyes and eliminate the external environment. I'd have to forget about the pain and paralysis in my body, and I'd have to get beyond time, and I'd have to start really believing in my inner world more than I was believing in my outer world. And just like when someone's present with you, if this consciousness needs direction and it needs orders and it needs a plan, and you start reconstructing your vertebrae, and then you start thinking about living in a wheelchair, or should you sell your home, or the moment you do that, you lost your attention, and it's not a complete image for this intelligence. So it would take me 3 hours every day to reconstruct my vertebrae, and I just kept starting, and then I would find my mind wandering to other things, and I knew that the design wasn't complete, so I'd go back and start again, and it took me a lot of time to finally really anchor myself into my brain.
Rhythm. Yeah, that's just fantastic and inspiring, Joe. Stu, you look like you're about to say something.
It's almost like we got a question about self-sabotage, where health is concerned, because we deal with lots of people who are, trying to get healthy and happy and live long and happy lives, but they're constantly self-sabotaging. By no fault of their own, but it's just the way that they're programmed. They fall off the wagon, they're smoking, drinking, perhaps they can't give these things up. Why do we find this so hard?
Well, I can answer that very simply.
Yeah.
The hardest part about change, without a doubt, and I talk about this in my last book, Placebo, the hardest part about change is not making the same choices you did the day before. Right. The moment you decide to no longer think the same way, make the same choice, behave the same way, have the same experience, or live by the same emotion, get ready, because it's going to feel uncomfortable. It's going to feel unfamiliar. You are stepping into the river of change, and the moment people start noticing that it doesn't feel good, they want to go back to do the very things that make them feel good again, which is they want to return back to their same chemical state. Going from the old self to the new self, crossing that river of change, is the biological, it is the neurological, it is the chemical, it is the hormonal, it is the genetic death of the old self. And most people, they'll say, yeah, I want to create a new life, but they cling to the familiar self and its emotions so much that the moment they stop feeling the same way as they always do, it starts feeling uncomfortable. The body, which is 95% of who we are, is the body as the mind, starts to send signals back to the brain that says, start tomorrow, this doesn't feel right, you'll never change, it's too much like your mother. That's the body sending signals back to the brain, so that then the person listens to that voice, that thought, that sub-vocalization as if it's true. And that thought will always lead to the same choice, which will lead to the same behavior, which will create the same experience. Then it'll produce the same feeling, and they'll say, this feels right. No. That feels familiar.
Yeah.
And people don't believe that they can go from here to here, because when they're in that unknown, when they're in that void, they can't predict their future. So the moment they can't predict their future, they go back to what they know.
Of course.
The best way to predict your future is to create it, right? But not in the known, but in the unknown. So when you get comfortable in the unknown, and you're willing to keep your vision on the other side, whatever that new self is, whether it looks a certain way, whether it feels a certain way, whether there's a certain amount of success, whatever that model that your brain can create, if you don't keep that vision alive, and that vision isn't real, you are going to always return back to the old self. So self-sabotage really is returning back to what feels familiar, because at least you can predict that. People would rather hold on to their guilt, because if they didn't feel guilty, they didn't know who they would be. It's just kind of this crazy.
It's crazy. And the question that popped in then is that, when you're creating the vision of your future, like is that like a muscle that you have to train to keep on track, almost having faith that the outcome's gonna be there? Because
that's a great question. Number one, my definition of faith is just believing in thought more than anything else, period.
Yep.
And so everybody already knows how to do this. Again, I talked about this in my latest book, The Placebo, because you're either going to be defined by a vision of the future, or you're going to be defined by the memory of the past and the self. So the old self is connected to the past. And so everybody already knows how to do this. Everybody has already done something great in their life. And when they've done something great in their life, they sat down and they said, what do I want? Who do I want to be? How can I get there? And your brain starts creating pictures and images. That's called an intention. Once you get clear on that intention and the vision gets more real, you start to feel an emotion. You start getting excited. You start getting enthusiastic. You get inspired. It's that combination of a clear intention and an elevated emotion that begins to cause the body to live in the future than live in the past. And we'll talk about this at the event in Melbourne. We go at great lengths to be able to explain this. So then, the moment you're in that new state of being, you start thinking about the choices you're going to make, the things you're going to do, the experiences that you want and how they'll feel. You get clear on that vision. And every day, like a garden, you keep feeding it. You keep giving it water. You keep giving it life. And then there's times in our life where we say we're going to do something and we don't actually succeed at that. And the reason being is because there's not enough time, we got busy, we got in an argument with somebody, you don't feel like it. And whenever we use feelings as a barometer for change, we'll always talk ourselves out of possibility. Because the moment we don't feel like doing it, we're returning back to the old self. So the person who arrives at their goal, at their vision, it's because that vision is their compass. That's where they're going. And because they can hold that vision clear in their mind, they're going to make choices consistent with that vision. They're also going to get clear on the choices they're not going to make. They're going to review the behaviors they're not going to demonstrate. They're going to get very, very clear on the experiences they have to stay away from and the emotions that bring them to a lower denominator. So we already know how to do this. It's just that most people get too distracted by meaningless things, and then they say, oh, well, I got to deal with this. And then the moment they get emotional, and the moment they got to deal with something that's less important, the vision disappears. Because the very definition of an emotion is something from the past. So the moment they feel emotional or upset, they're looking at their future through the lens of the past, and they'll never see that future any longer.
There you go. Yeah. Stu?
Yeah, it's fascinating, fascinating stuff. And you mentioned your book about the placebo, and we had a question about the placebo effect and how powerful this can be, because we interviewed a chap last week, and he told us a story about, was it cancer patients, was that guy?
Yeah, so they were referring to John Gabriel, right?
Yes,
Yes,
exactly right.
Yep.
So can you just outline that again, Guy, just so
Yeah, so basically, John Gabriel's a gentleman that lost, I think, over 200 pounds, and he gained a lot of weight, and then he finally started visualizing the fat falling off him, and he actually got back, and he's got these before and after photos that nobody actually believes are true. They're that fantastic. And he was talking about placebo, and he said that there was studies with cancer patients, and they split the group in half, and they gave chemotherapy to only half the group, and then a placebo chemo to the other half. And they said the placebo, 30% of them still lost their hair. And that was the kind of, we were like, wow.
Yeah. So
that's actually not the placebo, that's called the nocebo.
Right, okay.
Right.
The nocebo is, instead of getting a positive effect from an inert substance, you're actually experiencing the side effects because you believe you're going to get the side effects of something that is a drug but actually is an inert substance. So There's also a study that shows that more than 40% of people that are on their way to their first chemotherapy treatment and told that they're going to get nauseous at their chemotherapy treatment, they get nauseous on the drive over to their chemotherapy in anticipation of the effect.
So with that in mind, can we think ourselves healthy if the mind is that powerful?
Okay, I'm going to answer it on two levels, okay?
Okay.
You tell me how you can give someone a sugar pill, a saline injection, or perform some false surgery or procedure. And a certain percentage of those people will accept, believe, and surrender to the thought that they're getting the real substance or treatment without any analysis, and they begin to program their autonomic nervous system to make the exact pharmacy of chemicals of the substance that they think they're taking. So is it the inert substance that's doing the healing, or is it the body's innate ability? So think about this. 81% of people who are in a depression study that are given a placebo, 81% will get better from the placebo. So they're making their own pharmacy of antidepressants. More than 50% of people that are in studies for pain that are being conditioned, and they're getting saline injections and not having any pain, they're making their own morphine by thought alone. So then it's not the substance, it's not the inert substance that's doing the healing. The pill represents a potential in the quantum field called getting healthy. The moment that person thinks about that possibility of getting better, and they combine it with an emotion of gratitude or joy or hope, the combination of the clear intention and the elevated emotion is the exact combination that causes the person to move from living in their past to living in their future. So we have done extensive studies to prove that you can heal by thought alone. That's what the book is about. And we teach people how to do it, because once you understand how the placebo works and you understand the science behind it, why would you need the pill if you can teach the person to do the exact same thing, but instead of putting their faith in something outside of them, to put it inside of them, select an unknown in the quantum field, revisit that unknown till they make it known, and begin to change their biology by thought alone. And we've proven with brain scans and everything else that it's absolutely possible. So that's point number one. Point number two, think about this. It's a scientific fact that the hormones of stress push the genetic buttons that create disease. That's facts. 70% of the culture lives in stress the majority of their time. So now, it's a fact then that you can begin to think about your problems. You can think about something that happened in your past, or you can worry about something in your future, and you can turn on the stress response just by thought alone.
Yeah. So
if you turn on the stress response just by thought alone, and the hormones of stress can make you sick, then your thoughts can make you sick. So if it's possible that your thoughts can make you sick, is it possible that your thoughts can make you well? It's the same thing.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I watched one of your TEDx talks, and I think the term was metacognition, where you were then thinking about the situation that you're in and how you were responding, and that was having a dramatic effect on the way that your body perceived the situation as well.
Sure. I mean, think about this. The concept of metacognition means that you can think about what you're thinking about. You can observe how you're acting. You can pay attention to how you're feeling. And because of the size of the frontal lobe, 40% of our brain, that's the crowning achievement of the human being. That's the observer. That's the creative center. The fact that you can observe that means you're no longer the self. It means your consciousness observing the self. And because that ability allows us to modify who we are so we can do a better job the next time. Which means if you're not modifying your behaviors to do a better job the next time, then you're clearly not evolving and you're acting more like an animal and less divine. Yeah?
Yeah. So how can we, with so many distractions going on in the world, right? You know, everywhere you go, you got distractions bombarded at you. So how can we practice and truly remain present in the moment with so many interruptions happening? You know, I think, there's so many people, and I catch myself drifting all the time. Half the time, it's like, oh, come back, be present, be here now. You know, it's very difficult.
So I'm so glad that you're coming to the workshop, Guy, because you will not leave that workshop without knowing how to be present. Turns out that paying attention is being present, and it's a skill, just like golf or tennis. The more you practice it, the better you are at it. Now, your brain's job is to create coherence between what's going on in your outer world and what's going on in your inner world. That's the brain's job. So you got technology, you got school, you got demands, you got all these things, you got clients, all these things are happening, and your brain is trying to create balance between everything that's going on and control it. Well, that's fine if you're living your life and you got a lot of activities, but if you keep doing that over a period of time, you will shorten your attention span, because that's what a habit is. You keep practicing something over and over again, your attention span will get shorter and shorter because that's what you're doing. In order for you to truly make an impression in changing your biology by thought alone, the first step is becoming present. And we teach our students, without a doubt, how to find what we call the sweet spot of the generous present moment. And if you keep practicing it, sooner or later, you will know when you're there and when you're not. And if you keep practicing that, it should become a skill just like golf or tennis. Or it should become as natural as it is to lose your attention span.
Okay.
Are these practices applicable to children? Because children now are being born into a world with 1 billion distractions. And
yeah, I mean, I just did an interview today talking about children, and their brains are so neuroplastic. I have a problem with technology in children because it turns out that when children play a video game, or they blow up somebody in the video game, or they conquer a whole nation, or they break through the next level, the moment they do that, their brain releases enormous amounts of dopamine. And dopamine is the pleasure chemical. So when you release all this dopamine into the brain, the release of that much dopamine begins to desensitize the receptor sites in the brain, which means the next time they play, they have to play a little longer, or play a little harder, because it takes more dopamine the next time to turn on the receptor sites. So over time, you start recalibrating the pleasure centers to a higher level. And in the absence of that stimulation, children can't find pleasure in anything. It's called anhedonia. So you say to the kid, hey, why don't you go take the dog for a walk, or we're going to see your grandmother, or hey, let's go watch the sunset. And they say, boring, because why? Because they had just overstimulated their brain to such a degree that in the absence of that stimulation, they can't get their brain to turn on. Now, when you're talking about learning now in a school setting, learning should be a reward in and of itself. But if the child's brain has been overstimulated, then they can't get their brain to work. When they're in class, they will act out or get in trouble, because that's the only way they'll get their brain to turn on, because the rush of adrenaline begins to wake their brain up. Well, in the end, if you keep turning on those adrenal mechanisms, the blood flow goes to the hindbrain instead of the forebrain, and you wind up with attention problems and learning problems. And so I'm not a big fan of technology when it comes to video gaming, because if you look at a kid and you see them video gaming, they'll have this kind of withdrawn look on their face, because their brain is way out of chemical balance. And so when fast forward 20 years later and a child now has to face some rough emotional conditions in their life, and they don't know how to work with their own emotional state, they're going to look for something outside of them to change how they feel inside of them. And that's when addictions start to become trouble.
Yeah, wow.
That's fascinating. Wow. Atari have a lot to answer for in my childhood. That's all I can say. So, I know we're pretty tight on time. I just wondered if you could just give us a little insight into your workshops that Guy's fortunate enough to be attending.
Sure. I mean, I only go where I'm invited. And the reason that I'm doing workshops pretty much right now around the world is because I think it's a time in history where it's not enough to know. I think it's a time in history to know how. And after the movie What the Bleep, the most common question I was asked over and over again is great information, but how do you do it? So we teach these workshops around the world where people retreat from their lives for a couple days. They remove the constant stimulation in their external environment that reminds them of who they think they are. They separate themselves from the people they know, the places they go, the things they do, at the exact same time, long enough for them to learn vital information about possibility. So we combine principles of quantum physics, neuroscience, psychoneuroimmunology, epigenetics, to show people how they can take their power back and begin to produce greater effects in their own lives, in their brain, body, and their life. So we teach quite a bit of techniques for them to really begin to make those changes. In the workshop I'm doing in Melbourne in June, those people will learn quite a bit, and they'll have plenty of opportunity to practice all the things that we teach. Nothing in my workshops are left to conjecture or dogma or superstition. There's all scientific basis behind it, because once people understand what they're doing and why they're doing it, the how becomes easier, and they can assign more meaning behind it. After the event in Melbourne, for those people, we're doing an advanced workshop on the
Sunshine Coast.
Sunshine Coast, and I'm bringing my team of scientists. We're going to measure brainwave function. We're going to measure heart rate variability. We're going to be measuring the energy of the room and the energy around people's bodies, and we're going to show how powerful they are, because we want people to see that if you walk in one way, you can walk out another way.
That's fantastic. I'm so excited. I'm really looking forward to it. And I think it's June the 19th at the one in Melbourne I'm going to, so if you're listening to this before then, definitely come and check it out. Look, a couple of other questions that occurred to me before we wrap it up. And one is, the discussion when it comes to athletes, because we actually deal, our podcasters get listened by a lot of people that do CrossFit and elite end performance, and there's always just slight variables that seem to cut between first, second, third, fourth, fifth. Like that, these guys are so phenomenal. From your experience and what you know, the power of thought and intention applied there, like how much of that would that play in the outcome of the between winning and coming second, do you think?
It has everything to do with the outcome. It does. I've worked with so many professional athletes, and I can show you that you can take a person who's never played the piano before, and you can teach them one-handed finger exercises, scales and chords. They can practice 2 hours a day for 5 days, and at the end of 5 days, you can scan their brain, and they'll have new circuits that grow on their opposite side of the brain. It makes sense. You learn something new. You make new connections. You get some instruction. You get your body involved. Experience enriches the brain. You pay attention to what you do. You have to pay attention, repeat it. You're going to grow new circuits on the opposite side of the brain. Well, you can take another person, have them close their eyes, and mentally rehearse playing those scales and chords for 2 hours a day for 5 days. At the end of the 5 days, their brain is going to look like they've been playing the piano for 5 days and they never lifted a finger. Now, what that means is their brain is beginning to change, and they're beginning to install the hardware in their brain to look like their experience has already happened. In other words, you're changing your brain to do the activity better. You take that person who's never played the piano, you put them in front of the piano, and they can play the piano, because now the hardware program is turning into a software program. Why is that important for athletes? Because the more circuits you have in place, the more you can get your behaviors to match your intention. Point number one. Point number two, you can take a group of people and you can have them pull a spring for an hour a day for 4 weeks. At the end of 4 weeks, 30% increase in muscle strength. You know the physiology behind that. Yeah. Muscles break down and they grow back bigger. Proteins change. You can take another group of people and have them close their eyes and mentally rehearse pulling that spring and saying harder, stronger, never lifting a finger. At the end of 4 weeks, they have a 22% increase in muscle strength just by thought alone.
Oh, wow.
So the body begins to respond to the mind by mental rehearsal. So we work with, I don't care if they're Tour de France cyclists or professional golfers, the mental game in rehearsing the activity. Rehearsal begins to align the brain and body into the future. And any great athlete will tell you, when they are getting ready for an activity, they're reviewing what they're doing enough times, and when they get in there, they're no longer thinking about what they're doing. They're going to let their body take over because their brain and body have been primed into the activity.
There you go. That's fantastic. And would you sit there and meditate on that and just visualize it over and over? I'm thinking, or would that be something you'd just run over your head as you're...
I don't know. I mean, there's a CrossFit activity and you're doing pull-ups or you're doing cleans, whatever it is. The more the person can rehearse lifting that weight and begin to feel how much it's going to weigh and what's going to happen if their body wobbles and how they have to straighten it out and have to set themselves. And you can take them through every single step. Pause, breathe, hold, now exert. Come on, keep exerting. And you get the person involved in it mentally. They will get their behaviors to match their intentions when they actually do the activity, because they're loading the brain and body for the event.
Yeah, fantastic. That's just fantastic. And just to wrap it up, we actually ask a question to all our guests that come on every week. And and the one question is, what's the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
The best piece of advice?
Yeah.
Without a doubt, we're a work in progress. Make time for yourself. If you don't make time for yourself, no one else will.
Yeah. Perfect.
Mind and soul.
That makes sense.
Absolutely. And for anyone listening to this that wants to get obviously more of Dr. Joe Dispenza, where would be the best place to send them, Joe?
Just my website, just drjoedispenza.com. I mean, we have all our events and all the resources and everything we're doing pretty much around the world.
Fantastic. And we'll put links to all the show notes. We get this transcribed so people can read it as well. And we'll push this out and hopefully see a few more people come down in Melbourne as well. So fantastic. Really appreciate your time, Joe. That was awesome.
Yeah. Pleasure meeting you guys.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Keep up the good work.